in respect of getting it taken away from the solicitors, because they had an order at that time, but that order does not exist in Wilson County Court anymore. So I'm having fun and games that way. And as I say, I'm still on the have to follow up with the MOJ. I mean, they said they'd get back to me, and they haven't in the last 3 months. So I think that's ample time to suggest that they can't supply the paperwork because it don't exist.
So then they're not still like after you as such. You've served your sentence in their eyes, but you're disputing the time you've served. Is that where you are now?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Some reason I was knocked off of Skype just as you started.
Yeah, my apologies, no. It was me. I was trying to unmute my microphone.
Someone else is joining.
The mouse just went in the wrong place. Sorry about that.
How you doing, Ez? So yeah, I was just asking. So your point of view. So from their point of view, you've served your time now for that case, and you are disputing the time that you served. Is that where you are now?
Well, I'm not disputing it because they haven't been able to supply a copy of the warrant which is required to imprison you. So I'm there is no dispute in the sense that if they haven't got the paperwork, it is pretty clear.
But you don't need to go back to court for that. To discuss that with them. I mean, you can use that as an injury, and that's a perfect example of your injury, of your fear of deforcement. So, because this has happened to you now, you can when you have the correct claim, a land claim, so you're actually disputing the subject matter jurisdiction, etc., and you're actually going to take control correctly. And I think this is the only way you could probably get justice for that 6 weeks you've served, really, if I'm honest. Because anything else you do, you're disputing their equity bullshit, aren't you? But anyway, if you do claim your lands, and that's the issue that you take to the court, when you've released all your things and all the rest of it, which we'll get into, you'll learn, if you don't already understand, that is, once you've released all that and you actually claim your inheritance, that warranty, etc., and all the waste, claim your lands, you can. The reason you're claiming those lands and proving deforcement, by proving deforcement, should I say, is because where you want to claim, wherever you choose to claim, wherever that's going to be, the tenants, the fee simple tenants on there, are going to hold you out of it. When you submit them with your notices of interest in the lands, they're going to say, hang on a minute, what's this? They're not going to know, and well, that's what we assume. It's more than likely going to happen.
Yeah, the property was sold whilst I was imprisoned.
Oh, well, are you going to go back for those lands? Is that where you want to go back to?
Ideally, yes. But, I mean, as I say, all my property was, my chattels were disposed of, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, anything that's on the lands that you claim would be yours. That's the waste, if you will. They're all the tenements, aren't they, and etc. But whereabouts is that land? Like, is it like built up in a town or village, or is it on its own land with its own? Look, could you be self-sustainable on that land on your own, out of the system?
Not quite. I mean, because it's a first floor masonette, so you've got it floating in the air, which I was well aware of. So I was actually claiming the ground floor thing as well.
I mean, first off, you have to look at what the purpose of estates in reversion is, because that's what we're here for. And if you're only going to claim that one little bit of property there, it's not really practical for what the end goal is. And the end goal is being out of this system so that they can't come and, they kick you out of the property because someone else has buggered up somewhere else down the line. Do you know what I mean? And ultimately, because you don't have true ownership of that property or those lands, it can get taken away from you. If you want that type of freedom, where you look after yourself, you grow everything for yourself, your food and all the rest of it, then that's not practical to obviously claim that property there, is it? You want to be looking elsewhere, in my opinion, obviously.
So it's designed to sort of emulate the idea of the small holding, that you're self-sustaining on your own land. That's what you're.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I read it.
Which would apply to Nigel to a degree, but I mean, even your situation is that you're in a semi-detached property.
Yeah, it's not sufficient anyway.
Yeah, we wouldn't be staying anywhere like that.
We can't claim the land we're already on.
Because you can't own it yourself.
If I understand it correctly, we would have to dispose of that and claim something afresh. Because we're already perceived to be the donor of this land.
Well, it's not that, no. It's because that property, it's almost irrelevant how it's held because you're the one holding it. So, if you're the one residing on that property, you can't then come and claim from yourself as being the one keeping you out of that property, because that doesn't make sense, does it? It's like you're saying that there's two of you, one of you stopping the other one from getting in. You can't. It's not right, is it? So
that's how I understood it. Yeah. Even if I didn't phrase it right.
Sorry, who's actually speaking?
Well, that was just Nigel.
No, you.
Justin, which is Jay on the Skype chat.
Okay, Justin.
We've got Ez in. Oh no, Ez is not in the room. We've got Justin in the room, which is the charming fellow with the shorter hair, bigger grin, with it baring his teeth. David. Obviously, you can see his photo there.
Yeah.
And CS, I'm not too familiar with, but they're always here.
And Elvis Presley's Gordon.
Justin that was speaking before Nigel interrupted.
I'm good at that.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's Jay.
Yeah.
Do you want to say hello, Justin? Or are you busy? Let's see if he pops in.
Yeah, I'm here.
There he is,
I'm just listening to what you guys are saying. With regards to that, you cannot be in possession of your own land that you're claiming. You can't do a self-injury. It's like punching yourself in the face.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, then there is no remedy. The technical way of looking at it is under fee simple, there's the right and the wrong way. The right would be either descent or purchase. So that's where you would be disabling yourself if you had possession of your own property. So you have to be divorced. You cannot be in possession of anything equity, or you're going to have problems. Because you're accepting a title basically by purchase, which is the citizenship, the straw man. You got to remember everybody wants to get rid of this straw man, but the straw man is only existing because its authority is the land tenure, which is in trust by the British monarchy. So it's not a matter of fighting this fiction, it's a matter of just removing yourself from the fiction, which is simply redeeming that warranty for the land, the registration of live birth.
It sounds like you're in Canada.
Yeah, we're in southern Alberta in Canada, correct.
I've only been to the east coast, Toronto, before, and of course Niagara Falls.
What part of Alberta are you in?
We're in Lethbridge.
Lethbridge, okay. Is that near Kenmore?
What was that?
Is that near Kenmore?
Glenmore, or what do you?
Kenmore,
I can't hear what you're saying. Kenwood.
Kenmore.
Canmore. Canmore. Yeah, it's not that far. My uncle lives in Canmore.
Yeah, okay. That's where Mary Croft is.
She's okay. And is that CS?
She's in Canada.
Okay, but she's not part of this call.
No, she's not. No, she doesn't know about this.
Yeah, all those people like Mary Croft and Anna von Reeds, what was happening is they allowed people to basically become their own trustee executor, which you could allow yourself to get into a really good, comfortable position. But right now, I'd highly recommend not even going anywhere in equity. I'd recommend getting out of equity as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm.
You got to remember, this is how they, when I say they, I mean your peers of the world, test to see if you're mature or not. Did you reach the maturity level, or are you still playing as a child? You just wear adult clothing. Right? That's what this is about. Right? So there is no justice. There is no remedy for what's happened to you in equity. You have to let that go. Your remedy is getting your land back, because once you got your land back, then you're freed. You have your confirmation, your release from the Queen's Bench. Right? And there I'd also include...
And he's got his fear of injury to go along with it.
Yeah, but you got to remember, man can always do something against you. So if you're going to always prop up a concern that somebody's going to get you, well, then you shouldn't even come out of your shell.
It's for you to not go on and take possession of the lands yourself. When you're proving deforcement, you've got to go as near to the lands as you deem safe enough for you. If you're in fear of something, and essentially, if you're not in fear of anything, you can just go take the lands, and you could just go take the lands, and you wouldn't have that true end, if you will. But
I wouldn't do that though if you don't have a release or a confirmation, because no matter what you claim or proclaim, you're always going to be subject to the municipality you were born at.
I lost my point on that.
Can you enlarge on that a little bit for us, please? About the municipality that you were born at. Could you expand on that a little bit?
We're starting right from the beginning, I think, again. Well, municipal law, if you want to start with that, is your statute of uses from 1535. Maritime law, your corporations. We're all corporations. That's what we are. Even all the countries that we reside in, we're all incorporated, and that is your municipality. That's.
So the jurisdiction you're born in is you're more in terms of country rather than county.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's okay then.
Oh no,
this is where you gotta look at the domicile. The domicile is what's controlling all this. It's the seat of a law.
Yeah.
So every man has to have a domicile right now, right? Which makes sense, because 0 to 7, how are you going to protect your land if you're a heathen? You have no way of protecting it. So the monarchy protecting land for the heathen 0 to 7 is a great thing, right?
But if you don't come back at 7, that's when you take on the titles by purchase or descent.
Yeah.
Right. So past 7, if you don't know, you haven't never been taught. That's kind of where
you assume the domicile of your
up.
father. It continues, isn't it? And that all of their titles have descended by, purchase, and it's a fee simple title getting handed down, isn't it now?
Yeah.
Right. So if you've been given something by your family in fee simple and you accept that, you've disabled yourself from going and getting your inheritance, which is the land.
And it's any and every which way we're all living as well,
Right, because everything's through purchase, because they don't have the authority to not do anything through a fee.
That's it, until you claim those lands back, which is the ultimate, which is why we are here, estates in reversion.
Does everybody understand what the first level of the trust is that we have with the British monarchy?
I do.
But the point I'm wanting to look at is the fact that we're supposed to have donated to the monarchy our land. Where's the contract?
The contract it can be in various forms.
You did no, it can't be.
Yes, it can.
You did donate
it can
land,
be by an action.
And there's not. There's only one. It's the indenture. It's the registration of live birth.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah. And your acceptance of that grants the jurisdiction, though.
No. Well, the acceptance of your land tenure afterwards is what gives jurisdiction to all the deed polls that they create, such as the birth certification, driver's license, etc.
Yeah.
But don't fool yourself. It's only that one contract. And what's so important is that not only did we not sign that contract, we didn't elect the British monarchy to do it for us.
Which is why that original grant is de facto, which is why we can always dispute it.
And the injury that we all have in common is that equity is not able to see, hear, or do anything with common law.
Yeah.
So if you accept that equity not knowing with full knowledge, then you already have an injury. You don't got to look for further injuries inside equity.
That's
you already got the main injury.
Fraud in the tort of the damage, the fact that they didn't educate us about what was going on, everything was a fraud and it's a tort.
And there was also, remember, no meeting of the mind.
Yeah, there was no meetings of the mind.
No consideration either.
No consideration whatsoever. So the monarchy is at fault. It was a constructive fraud.
Yeah.
Right from the get-go. So,
but you volunteered to the fraud, so you've made it
You've
lawful.
agreed to play along.
Volunteer to a fraud. That's what their assumption is, or presumption.
Okay, well, let's break this down very simply because we have a group of men in the world. So in order to be civilized, we have to agree upon things.
I think I know
since
what
we
he's
have
getting
so
at.
much creed amongst us, we can't agree amongst God's beliefs or anything. So we have to look at some very basic facts, and that's why I keep going back to that 0 to 7. How do you protect a child's land from anybody coming in and just taking and raping that child of his land? That's the whole motive of this British monarchy, and that's a good thing, because from 0 to 7, well, 0 to whatever age you are right now, nobody's been protecting your land but that British monarchy. Okay, you volunteered to create the waste, you volunteered to do the damage, the desolation to your inheritance, right? We can point to our parents,
which is the acceptance
once
of the contract, which is what I was going to point out. That I think that's where he's not understanding it, or just didn't get it from the first way we explained it, is the acceptance to all of that is how you are acting and agree by the way way you live your life.
It's all about
it doesn't have to be a signed written contract from that sense.
It does seem very unfair that we went and ratified the contract by accepting the deed polls that come from the indenture. I get that. But you've got to move past that, because if that's where you've hardened your heart, you don't deserve land.
100%, yeah. It's frustration acting rather than understanding, isn't it? If that was the case.
This is the understanding part of our whole thing we're doing, right? You have to hit that cognitive dissonance where it hurts.
That's it, yeah.
Do a 180 and realize that this system's beautiful. It's been protecting you
for what it needs to be. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got its purposes, but that doesn't mean to say it can grow out and of its purposes anymore. I don't know.
And once you've hit the point where you realize that equity cannot teach common law, it can't hear it, it can't see it. So that's the reason you weren't educated in your inculcation schooling, right? You weren't given education. They taught you education in equity, which is not education outside of equity. Education inside equity is inculcation, where you're just repeating knowledge. You're not obtaining it. You surely didn't learn how to fish. You just got a fish on the hook and you're like, yeah, Well, there's somebody releasing fish down the stream so that you make sure that you get that.
I like that one.
And that's all they've done. They hoodwinked you by changing
in the background, and have they claimed the birth certificate, for that child?
I have.
I'm not sure. I didn't get the question. Sorry.
Who has got the baby in the background, and have they claimed on behalf of that child against the birth certificate?
That's me. I run with 6 kids, so I've got quite a bit. So at any given time, there is usually one that's hovering around me. Sorry. That's life. You don't want to do anything with the birth certificate, because the birth certificate is this acceptance of the land tenure system. I'll get your ball. Here.
Yeah.
Right? So the birth certificate, forget that. It's the registration of live birth, which I do have copies for all my children. But the problem is that until I and my wife are in reversion, we can't go and take over the trust for them. So Canada and the British monarchy are the best scenario for the best interest of the children. Until we are donors in the donor capacity back in reversion, it's just really, we're irresponsible, we're incompetent. So I go through it first, and then my wife will go through it, and then we'll go into court to take the trust away from Canada. Because you need 2 bodies in order to take a trust. You can't do it just by one. So I can't do that. I can't do a whole sweep for my family, as much as that would be nice. So if that answered your question.
I've made the claim that the birth certificate is actually a trust deed.
Right. Your birth certificate is a certification of your citizenship or your subject into the corporation or the land trust companies, the livery companies.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, here on England, we get 2. They're both called birth certificates, but there's a short form and a long form. And it's the short form that I think is equivalent to your live birth one.
Right, yeah. My grandmother migrated from England, and when I started learning about this, I looked at hers, and they do say that, but she didn't know anything about it, so I couldn't be like, well, have you tried to ask for anything else? So that'd be all on you guys who's in the UK. So if you've tried to get everything,
anything else,
apparently there's even a third one, which a friend of Nigel's got at one point, Mark.
Yeah.
All you need is what's got your parents' signature on it and the state signature.
Yeah, and it won't be the long or the short. You actually have to go back to the registrar's office and ask for it. And they're very reluctant to give it up these days because they know what you're about to do with it.
They don't do that. I asked them about
in Canada,
2 months ago.
It actually says on the application that they're not recommended to use for ID. So they're actually telling people not to even try to go for them.
Well, it says that on the long form birth certificate here. Absolutely.
Wrong. You don't want anything that's certifying anything. It's not to certify something. A certification is that you've gone past. That's a deed poll. You need to find the indenture. Just flat out, right? Ask them. I want a copy of my land tenure. See what they do that. I want a copy of the land trust.
Yeah, there's
Don't be afraid to ask function of government the hard questions, but don't ask anybody that's not a function of government any common law question, because you'll go to jail. And it sounds like they're putting people in psych ward if you start talking common law now.
Yeah.
So if you don't got that release for equity, don't be speaking common law to anybody unless it's a function of government. And if it's a function of government, make sure you know who you're talking to, like the justice in Queen's Bench, because he's got the inherent jurisdiction to go to common law. No one else does. And they're not playing no more. They're going to start singling out people here and getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Right? Because we all should have done this back at the latest at 13. So the system isn't set up anymore for people that gone past 13. They expect them to stay in equity and die in equity. Right? Born a slave, die a slave.
That's right.
Silly slave.
Yeah.
Cradle to grave.
And this is
Jackie,
why you
we're
have
gonna
to
come
be
in. Can I come in for a
careful.
minute? Jackie, we're going to
Yep.
comment on the live birth certificate there for a minute. Did you have some experience of the live birth certificate?
The live birth certificate is the one that your mother signs. That's the live
Yes.
birth certificate. Which is usually called the long form. I'm in America though, but that's how it is here. And then the short form is the one that it has no signature of your mother. It's like a copy or what they call an abstract off of the long form. And the one that I think is the land tenure can be used as a live birth because it's signed by a registrar who's representing the government. But there's another sheet which is really hard to get, which is called the worksheet. And that worksheet is what they make up the registration off of. So I think I posted it's on one of my blogs, but there's a thing about the birth certificate, and the way it kind of works is your mom fills out, you have the baby at the hospital, which is, well, I don't know if you say all this, but I'll tell you how I understand it to be. When you go into a hospital is actually a hospitality center. And they also have that. I have some written documents on it. That's where they drop off babies that people don't want anymore. So it's a drop-off.
Foundling Hospital.
Yeah, Foundling Hospital, yeah. Right. They make a foundling report.
Yeah.
And that foundling report, if it's never claimed, then someone, they'll call the parent, not the mother or something, but now the parent can inform the hospital that, the baby doesn't have a father, and because she doesn't sign it, she signs it only in her name as the maiden name, not the married name. So they put a birth announcement in the paper, and the father doesn't claim the baby. So since he doesn't claim the baby, then the baby goes abandoned, and then they take the application into a court registration, and they see if that application has a title that's able to be registered as a title. In other words, you're not a title until you're registered. Just because you're born doesn't mean you have a title. You have a name, and a name is a title. But for that title to become into the public, it has to be registered. So they register that name at a court hearing, and they have everybody, just like a regular court hearing, they notify everybody, but they don't know who the father is supposedly, so they put people unknown. And then they go through and they have this little registration hearing, and they say, yep, this person's can be registered, this title can be registered. So they register the title, and then they order the registrar. Well, actually, they just make a decree. I'll go back up a little bit. When they have the court hearing, they make a decree. And the decree says that this name is okay to be registered. So they order the registrar to register the name. And so that's when they make up the birth certificate. So then what they do is you get that birth certificate, and it's put onto another sheet, which it's just doesn't have the mother's signature on it. So the mother's signature one is really kind of the worksheet, but it's also the one that the mother informs the court that this baby is, a foundling. And so they appoint her, since she found it, kind of like you found a wallet, they appoint her as the one who's in charge of the baby, who becomes the trustee of the baby. So it's kind of pretty crazy stuff.
Does it matter if it's the mother or the father that signs, though? Because I remember with my kids, I signed at the registry office.
It can be signed by anyone. Yeah, it can be signed by even a government official or a doctor. The doctor and the other ones are just the witnesses. The hospital administrator and the doctor are the witnesses for the state.
It means little. Mm-hmm.
A doctor is actually a military position, too.
That's right, yeah.
The MASH. So anyway, what you have to do is you have to, I have all that stuff out of Minnesota, the state where I got all that stuff, and I have the decrees of registration and what they do and everything and how it all works, and that's where I got that information from. And it's a common law, a Torrens registration system. And in Torrance registration system, you can unregister too.
But it's all equity.
It's all equity. Yeah, once you get it registered, once you get the title, you're into equity.
You don't know. See, you don't even understand. Once the equity systems touch the land, it's done. Like there's nothing that you can do in equity to ever change it. And if land has been touched by equity, you are in equity, even if you don't register. This is the law of domicile, right? If you read the law of use and trust, it's going to explain everything in there, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it is. But how can they? What do you mean when they touch you? So say the mother never had a baby at home.
Where did the mother have the land or the baby? I said the answer. The land. You got to see the law of the land, right? If the mother is a donor, is she in reversion or is she in equity? Right? Was she in possession? Did she have title? If so, then she's been descending her children into basically bastards. But they're not bastards because we're in the Commonwealth nations, so they create the domicile for those bastard children, and they no longer bastards. They're heirs to the land, successors. Right? This whole law system is ours, but we don't want it. Why would you want it? It's insane. It's made for profit. Yeah. Right? So if you've got something that's driving you for profit, you might want to rethink your life. You're here for the wrong reason. I'm not saying you can't go and make profit outside of equity, but that's not why we're sent here to live. I think that's kind of obvious. This is why they have to charge you a fee for everything that they're doing. It's all a use, which you volunteer to. Ratified by the birth certification, which is a deed poll coming from your indenture. Right? On one side, in reality, we indent the contract so that it becomes three-dimensional. It becomes more than the 2D contract itself. Right? But when you're in equity, there is no 3 dimension to it. It's all 2D. This is why you have deed polls. Which is why when we create the land tenure for the child, it is in the indenture form. Because when you go to execute the remittance of the warranty, everybody who has to execute it is estoppeled from disputing its validity. That's a system of conveyancing from 1861. That's beautiful because that stops every motion that anybody in equity is going to put against you. You're going to have to defend yourself each time, but at least you've got the tool to slam them down.
Why do you have to defend a self-authenticating document?
Well, how old are you? Right? Did you do this with clean hands, or are you guilty of sin? Right? Born of original sin. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, that's a Catholic bullshit story.
No, it's not, because we're all in Christendom. All fee simple has come from Christianity, or more or less the usurpation of it.
That's the key, the usurpation of it.
Yeah.
Right? But they're not usurping it if you've gone and volunteered.
Agreed.
Right? You accepted it somewhere down the line, now it's become your folly, your great error.
Which is why our injury is in common law.
Now, see, if they can convince people that, there's a straw man, you want to get rid of all this, blah,
that your
blah,
battle
blah.
is in equity, then
you're walking away from your warranty. If you don't register your children into the system when you're in equity, they're still registered into it. They have to have a domicile. It's the law. It's the law of nations. It's an international private law. So all corporations that are land tenure companies, they have to follow those laws. Right? The Magna Carta is the great constitution for the corporation body. This is why if you volunteer to it, you can create waste to the land. They can't, which they don't. They have clean hands in this operation.
So the only thing we're looking for from equity then is this the proof that we were divorced.
Well, no, because you can prove that you're divorced by your actions alone, right? If you're holding any type of equitable position or possessions, then you can't ever claim you're divorced.
Right.
But if you are like William, you're in a camper camping now, and like your camper and everything is in somebody else's name, you're divorced. You got nothing, no possessions and no position. Divorced, especially after you sent your claim or staked your claim, right? You got to stake your claim on your land, obviously. If you've not done that, then you don't know what you're doing. But that's part of being divorced, right? Because in common law, possession of land is simply a claim. That's your claim of right. This is why they repealed it in equity, because people were trying to use it common law capacity in equity. So they repealed Section 39 of the Criminal Code to get rid of that shit. Too many people are trying to use common law in equity. Well, that's vexatious. Cue the OPCA litigation that they beautifully created here, which stomps out anybody incompetent trying to use land tenure law, which is common law, in equity court, which is slave court. It's foolish. It's nonsense. So anybody recommending that kind of stuff, you can see they're only making a profit off you. Even if they're not charging you something and you're just watching a YouTube video, trust me, they're still making profit off you.
I can totally understand that. I guess my sticking point or whatever is trying to figure out if we have our warranty, what do we need equity for? Because we're supposed to go out the same way we came in, right? So we go out, we get proof that we've been divorced by them, I guess, and then we can go to common law court. But I guess I don't understand exactly what equity has to do with us anymore now that we're in it, except to get a release out of it.
Well, you're not out of equity until you have the release. So don't kid yourself, right? We're all still in equity.
I'm saying that, so when we go into we make a claim, we're claiming that we want to be released. Is that the right way to say it?
No. Okay. Because you're not making a claim to be released, right? You're already released. It's free will. Nobody owns anybody.
That's right.
This is a volunteer system.
Got to know your standing.
Yeah,
right?
So then how can you mix the two together then, since you're already released, so you're not even in equity once you've set your release? So why did they say...
Okay, in equity you have to release yourself, right? You can't have any rights, duties, or actions tied to yourself in equity at all. So you have to get that done and over with, okay? Free yourself. Okay, in the same process, though, you're going to be wanting to make claim onto land because this is common. This is a Commonwealth nation, so it's common law. And in common law, you just have to make a claim in reversion to equitable tenants. All right, that's all you got to do to get land. You don't got to pay it. You don't got to do anything. You just make a claim. Simple. But now if you're in equity, you're disabled from doing that. So if you go and do that, now you're being frivolous and vexatious because ignorance of the law is no excuse. So yeah, you've got to come out the same way you went in, but the same way you went in wasn't the way that you come out, because the way you went in wasn't the way that you come out.
Naked.
Right? You came in as a minor, sucking your mom's boob. Right? Don't kid yourself. Right? This wasn't something that you chose, but it's awesome because it's protecting your land so that when you become a capacity, you can take it back. Right? Your mom and the state agreed upon this. So technically, it's your parents and the state's contract that caused this. But if you look at a system of conveyancing, you'll see right there, it says that the indenture is preferred method for the children because everybody's disputed or is stopped from disputing it who has to execute it. So that means like the government couldn't just go and say, well, you can't do this now. Right? They're stopped from saying it because under common law, this is the law. You can go make a claim. and get the land. You don't got to pay a fee for it. So as long as you follow the recognized law to get out, which is how you got in, right? They recognize, they agreed upon something in recognized law. It was written. Yeah, your mom wasn't knowledgeable what was going on, but hey, don't worry about that no more. Right? You only point to your parents once. And even then, you got 3 fingers pointing back to you when you're pointing. So it's always going to be your folly what you've gone and done. But at the same time, they can't turn around and say, you know what, it's your folly that you're doing this. They can't accuse you of it being your folly, right? But you can be a man and go, hey, this is my folly. Let's get over it. Let's get this done. Right? I don't need to talk about the past because we can't point to the past ever. Unless, I start writing it down on a piece of paper. Then I'm using that mark of the beast in my right hand that the scripture is so cleverly talking about. Right? You need to see through the words that's happening. This is why people think there's a straw man. The straw man was something that somebody made up so they could profit off common law being introduced into equity, which now you'll go to jail. And I think they send you to the psych ward. 30-day psych ward evaluation, and then you go for your hearing. I don't know for sure yet, but I'm quite sure this is what you're going to be treated like if you make a mistake. Not to scare anybody, but...
Been there, done that.
Okay, so then you can... There's your negative fact that you can't use as proof, but hey, it's there. You won't step in that pile again. Right, so as soon as you know the law, which is all based on jurisdiction, capacity, right? Who you speak to always matters where their seat in law is. So if you're speaking to somebody in the wrong seat in law, I'd say today you're going to get punished for it now. So we are talking about why was the Queen's Bench Justice, the Supreme Judge, for this? Why do we go to him, right? Not anybody else. It's in Blackstone's commentaries where I had read that, and I posted right after a chat where it shows, it says the King's Court, so it's a little different wording, right? But that's Queen's Bench today.
Yeah.
And that's why. It's because that law has never been repealed. They created jurisdictions that counter that, but as long as you don't go in those jurisdictions or you get out of those jurisdictions, you can use these common laws like 6An, which determine if there's somebody pretending to be alive or not with a person, which is a capacity, remember. It's not a straw man, it's a capacity. So if you're talking straw man, which I heard earlier in the conversation, you're operating in the capacity that's frivolous and vexatious right away. So double speak has already been decoded, and they're going to look at you and go, keep speaking, keep telling me what's on your mind.
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot in what you're saying there, and got to do it by the code, as they say.
It's cognitive dissonance is what I just heard there.
Yeah.
You're experiencing. It hurts.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it is like what I was explaining to my wife. When you wake up and you have multi-million dollars in your account, so money's never an issue ever again. But the important thing is that it's your land. You can go and do whatever you want. Your land. Nobody will ever come in between you and your land again unless you do something malevolent. That feeling is the feeling that you need to focus on right now, because that's an end game feeling that you experience probably daily, if not hourly. This is the true liberty that the Bible talks about in 2 Peter 2:19, right? Where they always offer you liberty, right? Come join my church, come do this, come follow this Justinian law, right? Come follow my code, my regulation. Yeah. I'll get you into heaven. Right? You're not going to find that in the States in Reversion, because it's where you got to find kingdom of heaven inside. Hey, you got to knock within that door inside you, and nobody can come and do this for you. We can't spoon feed you through the process, but we can spoon feed you to the law. Right? So the lights that go off in your head can only be turned on by yourself. And I think we all kind of agree that that's obvious at this point. Or maybe not, I don't know. People in Quebec, they were at first not understanding that the registration of live birth is what the indenture is called Canada-wide. It's not called something different. I heard some people referencing it as something different, and it's not. There's only one thing. If you've gotten something other than that warranty, which is that copy, it doesn't have to be the actual one, because I highly doubt they're going to give you the hard copy. But as long as it's a copy where your mom and that state is signed, you're good to go. That's your warranty.
And do you want it sealed or not?
Well, yeah, it'll have the seal on it. If you get something without the state seal on it, I would right away not pay for it, because it's like, can I have the crayon box so I can put the seal on at least?
Well, see, here they got really sneaky when they're doing it, because what they do is they put an embossed kind of seal on the paper. So it's raised up off the paper and it's the seal, but they don't do the actual embossing seal like they used to do. So I had one, and then they take my type, they take the one your mother signed, copy of that actual signature one, and then they put it on to another copy with the borders all around it in the color. So basically they take the live birth one and then they turn it into a birth certificate by copying the live birth one onto the one with the seal.
So if they're going to play sneaky, which is basically what I was trying to explain to you guys last time with shade, if they're going to create desolation to the inheritance, be shady, just call them out. Go, hey, I just want the warranty that's annexed in common law. I want to copy that. Because if it's annexed into equity, which means just attached to equity, you're dealing with a whole different instrument. It's a deed poll. And that will either get them to be like, raise an eyebrow, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Then you know you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know this. Right? In Canada, William had to get the government to actually work for him to get some of these files that he has given to us so graciously. Right? So it's not always just going to be spoon-fed to you, because we're 1,000 years almost into this beautiful equitable system that they've developed. So not everybody is trained at the front desk. So I would just call it out. I want a copy of the warranty that's annexed in common law. If she goes or he goes, I don't know what that is, you might want to go talk to your boss. I'm not going to pay for anything that is not a warranty that's annexed in common law. At that point, I don't know if they don't know what that is. You're dealing with a whole different game, because not only are they acting privately and unlegislated, but the source of their private unlegislated acts seem to be from just basic full-blown retard.
Ignorance, yeah.
Yeah, well, they all do the same thing. That's the way they've always done it, like you said, for their entire career, so they don't want to say anything. Like, I found an old copy of birth certificate that my mom had signed, not an original, of course, because they keep that, but a copy of it. But it had a seal on it, and then it wasn't on the bond paper. It was off the bond paper. So that was the one that they copy into the middle of the bond paper. And they make the bond paper a multicolor with both the red color. If you notice your birth certificates, there's blue colors. Like my father's quite old, he's 88. So he has blue color one. And then there's a pink color. All those things have to do with it anyway. So what they do, they mix. And then green color is if you ever seen a marriage certificate here. So they have these different colors. Anyways, what they do is they put it all together on an all colorful one, so it kind of includes all three together. It's all together. Anyway, so I take the one that is the one that isn't on the paper, of course, in the copy, and try to take it down there to get it authenticated, because it's just a copy of another thing. And boy, man, they took a while to try to figure out if they would put an authentication on that, because they knew exactly what that was going to mean if they authenticated that, because it wasn't on their bond paper. So yeah, that's kind of been dealing with these kind of games in this circumstance. But
you also got to remember that if there's a whole bunch of people coming in asking for like certifications of live birth and whatever names that people mistakenly call the instrument, in Canada, it's just called a legal permanent record.
Yeah.
Right, but the title that they give it in equity is called a registration of live birth. Right, so you're dealing with multiple jurisdictions just in a single indenture. That's why it's annexed to common law, but it's really sitting in the natural realm, the natural jurisdiction realm. Right, that's the agreement. There is no other agreement that you have with the monarchy, and all the corporations are owned by the monarchy. Or you'll have your own private dictator that's usurped it. But either way, if the land's touched the monarchy or the monarchy's touched the land, and a dictator is now in power, you still got a land tenure that's just being, usurped at this point. But it's still there. That's what I was trying to explain to you. Like, even if you're not registered, your children still have a domicile no matter what. So they can still go in, like say you protect them under all your ideology and creed, and they hit the age of 18 and go, shit, dad's crazy, I want to go get my land. Right? But they've never been registered, they don't have a single ID. Well, when they go into the Queen's Bench, you can bet your ass that they'll create the domicile for that man so that he can get his land. Why? Because his dad was part of it, and the land was touched by the British monarchy. So there's your two bodies that have the power over the trust, right? Why you have to have the corporation and the volunteer, right? In order for you to be a trustee, you can't just be like, write the Queen and go, so I got this new domicile with Canada. She's going to crumple that shit up and probably call the RCMP. Right? You got to go the proper recognized route. And that's what exactly the parents are doing. Yeah, it's their folly, but recognized way in, recognized way out, right? Yeah, we went in naked, but you're not going to be coming out naked. You're going to come out with land, and you're going to come out with more money than you've ever had in equity because it's yours. It's not somebody else's, so there's no fee on top of anything. You'll have real money, right? Carl Lentz, he had that infamous quote where the police are asking him about his money, and he's like, well, I see my money. And they're like, well, isn't there like a 10 American, 10 Canadian? He's like, no, I see mine. Right? And he sold that to everybody. And everybody picked up on that, trying to use that ideology. But that's where you got your merchant. He's taken common law and placed it into equity and sold it. People take it and run with it and get into trouble where it's real, but it's not in that jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Right? Estate in reversion. You don't want estate in anything else. Especially your life estate.
That's it.
And any other questions or?
Well, it was actually one question that you mentioned that it's vexatious to make a claim while you're in equity, yet you have to do that first initially, as you mentioned, in order to later on bring in enforcement. So how are you doing that right now? You're in equity, you make a claim on the land, and then you got to go into Court of Queen's Bench and get a writ of release, and then go back and say, okay, well, I want my land, and obviously they're not going to give it to you, and then you're going to have a deforcement or you're going to have an injury in equity. Is that right?
Yeah, what you said is absolutely right, but I'm sitting just like how the justices are, and they're going, right? Because what you said was right, but what you understand is wrong. Okay? So you went and claimed your land. You have to do that in a certain capacity or a certain way which would be your capacity in order for it to be in common law. So you have to stake the land with your actual notice. Somebody in fee simple doesn't do that. They pay a fee, right? They apply, right? They get a realtor or something. I don't know. I've never gone through the equitable process there. So however that is not the same way that you go and do it in common law. So in common law, you stake the ground with your notice, and now you've done it in common law, right? So yeah, you might be trapped in equity, but somebody who's in equity and goes and does that surely will be going to get their release and confirmation right after or in the process, and not just be vexatious and frivolous in doing that, staking land. Although I do know some people who are doing that currently, which they will go to jail for it. So you see that, right? You see how that works, David? Like you could go stake the land now with a notice saying, hey, I'm claiming this in reversion, blah, blah, blah. And then that's all you did. And then you move on to the land and you start building, and it's all hunky-dory until equity comes and punishes you.
Right.
Right. But if you go through the process of reversion after or during that, then it's a whole different story, right? Because now you're basically, well, you're being competent. Not basically, you are being competent. So the short form of the answer would be competence is what determines it, your competence of capacities. Okay. Right, I wouldn't go claim land, which involves staking it with a notice, your four corners, and not going through the rest of the process of reversion. I wouldn't recommend doing any of the steps by themselves. I would set it all your ducks in order so that you're ready to take them down. Be prepared for them putting in motions that right off the bat that you're frivolous. That's expected. You want, and that's actually a good thing. You want them to call you OPCA right off the bat, right? Because then you can use the system of conveyancing from 1861, which estoppels them. It's a function of governments. Estoppeled from disputing the donor when he reemits his warranty. Do you see how easy it is? The system is ours, but it's up to your competence level. If you're not competent, then you're going to fall, and you make others fall easier because of the incompetence that you displayed. Which goes back to that 0 to 7. If I see a little girl that's say 4, and I know that some douchebag's going to be able to come and steal her land from her, my heart's broken right there, and there's no cure to that. But for some reason, there is. It's called the British monarchy. And their whole land tenure system. That is the cure. Because then it allows me to now become that monarchy. I didn't elect the monarchy, but they've done a hell of a bang-up job up to the point that I become of capacity, of age. Which I think everybody in this group, you'll all come to that epiphany. That this is the most beautiful system that we have in our current life. There's nothing that seems to surpass this. Technology is mute to the land tenure system that we have protecting children. Right? Because I think it's at the age 75 that you disbar yourself from your inheritance. So once you hit 75, they won't even let you. They won't even hear your Queen's Bench application or claim. I'm not 100% sure on that though. But I do know that once you start getting up there in the old age, it gets trickier. Ooh. And you only have to look at it. What age was that again? Latch. I think it was 75. I'm not sure though.
Okay.
And it might actually be 75 years past or something. I cannot remember. It was something I read, and I read so much that if I don't continuously talk about it, it somehow slips my mind, and I have to go back to my source material.
I'm the same.
Well, I just said I think it's every 70 years it's every 7 years a person remains in bankruptcy before they're out. after judgment's been made, and I think it's every 70 years that's done with the corporation or like the country.
Well, you're presumed dead
So
after
maybe it's
7
7.
years. So after
Right.
age of capacity, which is normally around 13, Canada ends protection for children at 12. So you can see that they echo the Jewish creed, which is just usurpation of the Torah. But yeah, it's usually around 13 that they recognize that the age of capacity should occur. Right? If your parents were up to par, you should have become a son or daughter of law at age 13, if not sooner. And this is actually why you have children, leaders, and kings in our past, right? It was really just that simple, protecting the land. It's always been about protecting the land, right? In 1688, we didn't have a way out until that year, and people didn't choose it. They chose to stay in comfortable equity, right? Fast forward today, we now have human rights that we share with dolphins, apes, and robots. Like, hey, that's what equity means. So if you feel you're at the same par as a robot and a dolphin or an ape, then I recommend you stay in equity. It's a good place for you. You don't sound too sound to me. But if you don't, and you don't want to be treated as such, then I highly recommend that you continue learning the material here. And if you've gone through those first 4 books that we have on omnipotence, yeah. I think it's a list of 8 books actually. But if you just go through the first 4 and only the first couple of chapters, you don't even have to read through the whole material. Most of it's right off the bat. You're going to understand the system in a whole different light. And then like people like me or William, we don't really have to talk about it anymore because it'll be more of a group effort where everybody will be chiming in that, hey, this is what we learned. Right, which is what I was trying to get with that structure of our meeting, right? That we all kind of jump in prior to the main orchestrated call, and then we're not doing all this chatting, right? Conversing is what it is, which is fine. It's fine to converse, but we're not going to grow, or we're not going to go forward in reversion if we're just continuously conversing. Right. Well, at this point, we should all kind of know. On that note, is that reversion? Yeah, go ahead.
On that note, is that reversion call on tomorrow?
I don't know what's happening to William. Every time his bandwidth, he's having issues with it. So he's really directing what we're kind of doing as the group, as well as Justin. Justin, you can chime in anytime.
I think it's the calls are quite good for William to take. We can all chip in here, there, and everywhere. But if we're going to have like a scheduled weekly call that's on a specific topic, like this week, we're supposed to be on the levels of trusts and incorporeal and corporeal hereditaments. But obviously, we've got 2 newcomers again. It is again, like you say, having to start from scratch again, which isn't everyone's fault, but.
This is kind of where whoever brings new people in, you got to show them the videos that we got so that they don't come in not knowing what's going on.
I've done all that.
Nigel is quite new himself as well, though, so he could probably only get
everything I could find that I thought was, how can I say, helpful in the time span between last week and the call tonight, I've shared with both Lawrence and...
That's
to be fair, I've really tried to do a good job of getting them both up to speed in terms of, putting the material
how do you 2 feel about it? How does Gordon or Lawrence got anything to say?
Well, my best advice for that is when you show people the material, ask them 2 questions. Ask them to write down any questions that they have that can be answered by us, and then ask them finish the question thing off with them. What they like best about it, because that seems to always be the key when you ask somebody what they like best. Because if you ask them just to complain, that's where their train of thought is gone. It's gone to a negative realm, and we can't use. It's just like law. You can't use a negative fact as proof. So if you're going to use a negative mind to proof your reality, manifest it, it's going to go nowhere. We're just going to converse. So ask them Ask them questions, like write down questions, and then what they like best about it. Those two answers will give us so much source material and to grow the person's learning path that they become the teacher themselves, and they start self-teaching, and they'll realize that, and they'll get like a shot of dopamine every time they see that they've taught themselves something, and then they're going to want to teach somebody else that method. And that's that fishing. It goes back to fishing, right? You get a shot of dopamine when you catch a fish, but only if you know how to catch it.
Well,
you don't know how to catch a fish, you don't get that.
Practically speaking, what you're doing is really excellent, but you have to see it from the point of view that, in terms of a structure, you've built a train and there's so many seats on it, but the problem is I haven't got all the seats filled yet and the train can't really go, but you're itching to go. I mean, there are a few other people I'd like to introduce this to, but you can't do it instantly. And you have to, this is such a paradigm shift for most people, thinking completely at 180 degrees, as you said, to what traditionally most people have picked up on. It takes them a while or two to evaluate in their own mind, well, actually, first of all, does this resonate with me? Is this something that I feel is correct? And if so, then, where do I start engaging with it? So I think, you've got to have a little bit of patience. It's very early in the game.
Nigel, I would say those are the wrong people to bring here. The people that have to think on this and absorb it first are the wrong ones that you're bringing here. They're still too much in the system of equity, like the Matrix movies. They're not going to know how to come out of equity and think that you're going to cause harm, right? So your interaction with men needs to be protected there. Obviously, if somebody has interest in this area, that's your door to open it up. But I wouldn't be like, you want to come talk tonight? And then boom, and here's the material. That you can't do.
No, well, like I said, I mean, I have enormous respect for both Gordon and Lawrence. We've all been friends for a great many years. We share a lot of information, and we've all been searching passionately, looking to find, a way of addressing the problem of feeling enslaved in the system.
Yeah, 100%, Gordon. I mean, Nigel, sorry. I mean, we are happy you're here as well. Do you know what I mean? We want more people to know about it and know the truth. It's just because, like, from my perspective, I'm not fully there yet. Although I do know quite a lot, and I've took so much in over these last 8 months or so, and for me to be able to learn that fine, to always be like Justin said, if he reads something and doesn't discuss it, he can lose it, and it's almost like, because I'm not discussing the deeper levels, it's not sticking as much, if that makes sense. So that's all we're highlighting, the fact
best
that
way to learn
every
anything
call
is to
has to
teach
be.
it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And that's why I'm trying to.
But we keep
I encourage
teaching
everybody
the
to
very
join in. Like,
Yeah,
joining in is a great
All I'm
thing.
saying is, for a lot of people, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And that's what happened for me, meeting you guys. And I'd be quite open and honest. I mean, I even wrote to William and explained that, I kept going back and revisiting Remitter from Blacks. I kept looking at the Cess Decay. I mean, where I've been and my story would take a...
You just didn't have that final push in the right direction.
So many different avenues and so many different aspects of law, trying to find answers, and it's so easy to be led by others who believe they've got the answers, and yet you always have to come back to your inner self and say, what resonates with me? What does my intuition tells me right? Because this is a personal journey as much as anything, and it has to ring true. So, when I started looking at your materials over Christmas, and I did have a real long look at everything, I'm still doing so, decided to sort of come in a bit closer and join the calls and one thing and another. But when you say they're the wrong people, I don't know anybody else who truly even understands fee simple.
That's a good point.
So, you've got to give people a margin that they may, like me, have been the last 12 years looking under the hood to find out how it all works. But I haven't actually stumbled onto that magic ignition key, So all I'd say is you've got to give everybody a little bit of room to, to maybe say, well, look, I'm kind of like I'm on the path. I put a lot of effort into it. But you understand that the whole system out there is trying to keep us on the wrong path. There's lots of rabbit holes to go down, and they're all cheeseless tunnels. So you can understand that it takes a lot of testing and perseverance to actually get to this level. Does that make sense? You know, you can go off a lot,
100%.
weird directions with stuff. I mean, you know, people were following Carl Lentz when he came to the UK for weeks on end, you know. Even Winston Strout came to London in 2009, and everybody was chasing his tail around the town, you know.
The reason those merchants, though, come over to the UK is because they've been banned from equity here.
I get it,
So
but you
they
know,
come over to the UK to make more profit. That's what it is, though.
There's still a couple of really good people out there who I think would be very interested in this, and it's just a question of catching up with them and perhaps, you know, let them know what's going on here. But I agree with I understand your frustration as well, that, you know, you want to start moving up the ladder, and yet there are people still coming on the first rung.
Well, it's not that I'm so much frustrated with anybody coming in new. Like, don't get me wrong. I love new people coming into this. And if I could go door to door and show people, I would be doing it.
It's not our job to go waking them all up, you know.
Right. Everybody's got to carry their own cross.
Yeah.
You can't carry others' crosses. Right. But the one thing is like, we've had, I think now, well over almost half a day's worth of recording. And have we discussed natural law? Is everybody on that path? Because that should be the first thing that everybody agrees upon. And we should already have material that's made video form so that newcomers can just touch on that. So that we can present stuff that not only can then be discussed, but it's there. Right now, it's all just still in the readable material form, which nobody wants to do. There's very few that'll actually sit and read the material. If we all sat and read the material, there would be no purpose to the Skype call or anything, unless we're talking about, you know, stuff in reversion, like how many cows are you getting?
Well, the reason I haven't contributed anymore is because I haven't done all the reading on that's on the website yet. So until I've done that, I don't feel competent to join in, because I can't see the different angle, if you like, where you're coming from with reversion of title. I mean, I'm well aware of what it is or what it's meant to be, because I've worked with other people over the years who different perspectives, and so I'm not prepared to sort of join in until I know the perspective that the group is focused on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in that case, I'd say you've maybe not been prepped enough then, because you should at least understand what our purpose is. What this is about: claiming our lands, our freedom. It's about understanding the origins of English law in its as a whole, and the entire system and where it come from, and ultimately getting yourself out of it.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. That's the purpose for being on this path.
Yeah.
That's what
You also have
the last 10 years plus. Because maybe we've followed a few false trails to the, you know, in our quest to get there.
Well, that's another thing, is that the cognitive dissonance isn't really the group's responsibility to get rid of, right? But we can cushion you and direct you to the material, not our material, because we as a group don't really have material. We have omnipotence that's just directing you to the source material that all the justices are using. All the men that are sitting behind the benches, they use this material, and they can't use anything else unless you've gone into equity. Then that's a whole different, you know, up is down and down is up. But the common law doesn't change. They can't change it. So what's governing our warranty always remains the same. So if you start speaking what they speak, that's where in the past people have had little successes, and they've been able to get out of equitable charges by just, saying even, hey, isn't this a common law jurisdiction? And you'd have justices leave the bench and stuff, and people would think that's a win. In reality, it's never a win, right? It's equity. The win is when you get that release, right? So there's really only a few things that you have to express when you introduce people to this. It's the land is the goal, right? So there's your subject matter. Nothing was going to go past that. And your personal jurisdiction is the capacity you're operating in. So that's basically where the learning curve comes into play, is that, because everybody gets land, unless you go crazy and you want to redefine land as soil, or I'm sure we can just all agree land is just everything. Okay.
Yeah.
So once you get past that, it's now the learning curve to switch your capacity, right? And the capacity thing is what's been hidden from everybody. And I'm pretty sure some of the people were paid to teach capacity was physical things like straw men and stuff.
Yeah,
so then that's diverted much of the cognitive basically stream that we have all going and tapping into when we grow up. Right? That's the hardest part, and that's what's making this group stumble, is because we don't have any of the videos or anything set up to comfort people through that. Right? I can't walk you through the door, but I can open the door, show you it, and then go on to the other side and welcome you through. But you got to go through it, right? So this is kind of where all of us as a group, I noticed this last time when we were talking there, we care too much.
You're going to have to get a wipe anyway.
That's it.
You can never care too much. I mean, it's a great quality, and that's what really separates us,
but you can care too much, right? Because if I give you money and equity and not teach you how to get out of equity, I didn't care about you at all. I could care less about you.
Yeah.
Right? So this is where we focus on what's the material, right? And this is where William's really great at it, because he's got it all up in his head. Mm-hmm. He's only talked English law for the last 4 years straight. So when he guides these talks, you can tell the tone is completely different. He's just going right back to that source material, and it's never anything going past that, right? Or he'll talk about how we use the source material to move forward, right? That as a group, we need to hold on to that mentality, because I think we lose it lots when William isn't part of this call, just because we don't have that English law in our heads like he does.
Well, I don't mind putting my hand up here and now and saying on occasions I judge myself as being rather a slow learner. I have to kind of keep repeating stuff and digesting it. But when I get it, I really get it, But what I'm trying to say is I do have to truly possess it. I'm never, ever going to take a flyer or take a chance on it. Does that make sense?
Right.
So,
that's why we provide the material, so that you go and read it, not me or William say, hey, this is what it says, or I'm bad at going, hey, in other words, this is what it means, right? It's good at one sense, but if you don't go through that source material, you're not going to know what I mean when I go, well, in other words, and then I give you a parable, it won't make that light bulb click for you. Whereas if you read that material, you're going to see where I'm going with whatever I'm talking about.
Well, I've certainly always been very fascinated with this whole concept of estates. And, was it 2008 or 9, Frank Collins suddenly came onto the scene. And I'd actually heard about him about 6 months ahead of him ever coming out publicly and start his calls. Basically, somebody in the UK who I knew quite well said, you want to come on here and have a listen to this? Don't say anything, just listen in. And at the time, Frank was getting a lot of very good information from a couple of Brits, and one of whom I knew, who's since moved to Spain. And that's what sort of started that. So, and then there were other people who likewise were coming on board around that time, who were talking about the estates and being the executor of the estate and so on and so forth. And various people had a bit of a dry run at this. There was one guy over in Kent who was a farmer who was going to be repossessed of his land, not so much from a financial point of view, but because the council felt that the way he was treating the land was inappropriate. Basically, he was dumping a lot of stuff on it, recycling, and it was getting out of order. And the locals were all complaining. Anyway, long story short, he basically ended up in court and trying to declare that his legal fiction was dead and that he was appearing as the man and all that kind of stuff. Early kind of doors in the game of this. Anyway, sort of the next day, local newspapers said, here's a man in court claiming he's dead, but he's very much alive. And, you know, so there was a lot of negativity around it at the time from, you know, the first people who were really trying to have a go at this and going at it a bit blind, quite honestly, and rather uninformed. So we started sort of studying a bit more about the whole idea of the estates and so on and so forth. And people started getting books out and creating their manor rolls and one thing and another, and having their seals done. And I see one of our friends over in the States is currently running a course doing that, Kurt Kallenbach. Join my club, spend $1,500 and I'll do your seals and I'll do this and I'll, you know, and I'm just thinking, wow, you know, they're still spinning their snake oil, you know. But the whole idea of the estates is very fascinating, but for me, it's bringing it into the right context. And that's what's really helped on all of this, because I've always had a bit of a quandary trying to think in terms of what does it really mean? You know, the whole estate, you know, we have a life tenure, a life estate, and so on and so forth. So this has been quite a revelation for me. I'm sorry for being a bit wordy here, but just trying to explain probably a little bit about, you know, the path we take can appear very confusing and very conflicting. You get pulled in this direction, you get pulled in that direction, you see people making a mess of it and think, well, better not go there. So you start looking into it more deeply, but you're only as good as kind of the information you have access to. That's the point I'm making. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps at all, but kind of how I see it.
No, we love it when you guys chime in. Like, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from asking questions either. If you have any questions asked or anything, any type of
I do
interpretation.
Yeah, I do have a question. First, maybe make a statement here. Maybe we bring the idea or definition of natural law into the 21st century. I would say natural law is in the here and now, and all other law is in time and space. That probably sums it up the easiest. Does anybody understand that?
Yeah. There is only
okay,
the present.
good.
There is only the present.
So natural law, yeah, that's all it all deals with, the here and now, and that's how we should speak, I think, coming into court. But that's, you know, for our further discussion down the road. Back to the very beginnings, we were talking about the birth certificate, registration of live birth. Now, we know for a fact that the registration of live birth records an event. Now, what is that event is what I want to get at. And, you know, keeping in mind that equity governs the use of things and does an accounting of its waste. So I was wondering, you know, if anyone can chime in on that and find out or know of what the event is. And I know you classified, Justin, it's the maybe it's the acknowledgement or the understanding of the warranty, but I'm not 100% convinced on that. So,
yeah, in my version, the event is the creation of the estate trust.
Yeah, I go with that.
Okay.
And that's all it is.
I mean, again, that it's I mean, equity only does the accounting of waste. So how does they get moved into equity? If that's what I'm trying to, you know, determine, then.
Look at Section 4 of the Magna Carta, and that's your direct, absolute truth.
Section 4, okay. Thank you.
And it's, I'll explain it. It's waste. Only the citizen can do the waste to the land. No one else can, and that's due to the law of use and trust. So I believe it's page 5, if I remember. It says there that the body politic's not capable of a use or trust, aka the monarchy, has no capacity for use or trust.
Because their body's framed by the will of the king.
Right. That's why they invent corporations, which then would have been how we led into incorporeal and corporeal stuff, your hereditaments and tenements.
Yeah, there's two YouTubes, part 1 and part 2, do explain it rather well. It's very good, that is.
Yeah, William did a bang-up job with that. Yeah. He was quite happy too.
Does anyone, because obviously we're coming up to the 2 hours, so it'll be good, obviously Justin might need to get off and stuff, so does anyone have any final questions and that before we call this call a day? Obviously anyone can carry on talking if they want to, but I'll keep the recordings down.
Yeah, if not, I got a suggestion. If we ever want to talk, don't be afraid anybody to just ask if we can do a Skype chat.
Yeah.
Right? Don't wait until the Mondays to unload everything. If there's something that's picking your brain and you really want to get a chat going on it, ask. You'd be amazed at how fast we'll be able to jump on things.
Right? It seems that would be really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, definitely.
It actually seems that when we schedule this Monday call, the more that we give it order, the more it seems to fall apart. So I say go with nature, just like nature, and just stay in the now.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's nice to have a part of the call, especially for new members, to sort of get to know each other and